In Los Angeles, Marina lived unseen, just another worker in a luxury hotel. But one morning, a single encounter would shatter her quiet routine and awaken a past she thought was gone forever. Stay with us, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Marina arrived at the Grand Regency Hotel long before sunrise. Los Angeles still blinked with half-drowsy streetlights as she stepped off the bus and crossed the shining, empty lobby, her reflection gliding over polished marble. She didn't walk fast or slow. She moved with the even rhythm of someone practiced at not drawing attention. In the service corridor, she changed into her uniform, sturdy shoes, fitted jacket, hair pulled back tightly. She slipped on her gloves as if preparing for surgery. The metallic scent of sanitizer blended into her breathing so naturally she barely noticed it anymore. She pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, bottles clinking softly. The blue liquid, the green, the clear. She knew them like old companions. When she leaned to scrub a stain, it wasn't guesswork, it was instinct. Each tile had its own story to her eyes. The other employees greeted her with vague nods. She preferred it like that. Being unseen meant being untouched. Only someone paying too much attention would notice how she walked close to the wall and listened without seeming to hear. Marina often thought of Leo then, likely still asleep back in their small apartment, waiting for her text before leaving for school. She had packed his lunch at 4 a.m., watched his chest rise and fall, whispered promises of a more comfortable life she wasn't sure she could keep. It was easier to imagine herself as just another cog in the quiet machinery of the hotel than someone carrying such promises. That Tuesday, the quiet was broken before dawn. Mr. Rivera approached with a clipboard and a stiff expression. "There's a high-profile guest arriving," he said, eyes never landing directly on her. "Make everything perfect." She nodded. Perfect wasn't a goal for her. It was a habit. She was changing the water in an orchid vase when she noticed them. Men in dark suits moving through the hallway with the silent precision of soldiers. Their eyes scanned the space before their feet dared step forward. Something about their presence tightened the air around her. Guests at this level usually meant unpredictable chaos, whispered instructions, last-minute demands. Marina moved without looking at anyone directly. 2 room service waiters whispered near the door. One, half laughing, said, "They say a real sheikh is coming, one of those who owns islands." The other lowered his voice and muttered that such people trusted no one outside their world. Marina didn't react. Her cloth made slow circles against the table edge. Through the window, the sky hovered in a heavy grey, promising rain. Mrs. Duarte appeared then, tall, thin, mouth pressed into a line that looked permanent. She spoke without greeting. "Marina, finish the hallway and leave before they arrive. No standing around." Her tone wasn't harsh, just dismissive, as if Marina were another piece of furniture to arrange. Marina placed her bottle back on the cart, folded her cloth, and nudged the wheels down the corridor. The silence became so polished it felt sacred. At the long mirrored wall, she corrected a dried watermark with a practiced flick of her wrist. For a moment, she thought again of Leo's twisted jacket zipper and how he'd laughed at breakfast when she told him today would be different. She didn't even know what she meant when she'd said it. Sometimes she fed him hope just to keep herself standing. A sudden flurry of movement at the corridor's end signaled the arrival. Men in sleek suits, tiny earpieces, synchronized steps moved first. Behind them came the guest. Medium height, warm bronzed skin, neatly trimmed beard, dark robe falling beneath a tailored jacket. He walked slowly, but his presence entered before he did, pressing the air forward. Mrs. Duarte strode beside him, smiling mechanically. "Welcome, sir. Everything is prepared." He didn't respond. His eyes passed over each polished surface as if measuring its honesty. Marina shrank backward toward her cart and lowered her head, but her curiosity betrayed her, and her gaze flicked upward for an instant. That was when it happened. The Sheikh stopped. Not before the manager, before Marina's cart. He stared not at her face, but at the bottles, the perfect arrangement, the cloth folded like an envelope, the quiet dignity of a cart no one ever respected. The hallway froze. Marina's heart thudded twice, once from fear, once from something nameless. He spoke then, softly, in a language the others didn't recognize. The words were brief, floating like a quiet string of notes from some distant place. Mrs. Duarte turned, confused. Mr. Rivera tried stepping forward. He spoke again, this time more clearly, eyes fixed on the folded cloth in Marina's hand. Marina's mind rushed backward through years she had tried to lock away. Without meaning to, she tasted tea and mint on her tongue. Somewhere deep in her memory, she heard turning pages in a vast library. It was not the first time she'd heard that language. It was buried in her bones. She willed herself not to answer. She clung to her cloth and held her breath. "Don't be seen," she reminded herself. "Being seen is dangerous." But the Sheikh's phrase slipped inside her like a key, brushing a lock. Before she realized, the cloth trembled in her fingers. He said something again, slower. She felt every word crash against the wall she had built, and then, without moving her feet, without lifting her chin, she opened her mouth. Her voice came out low and steady, the accent soft, intimate, speaking back to him in his own language. Just as the final syllable touched the air, the door of the Esmeralda ballroom burst open from inside. A pale young assistant rushed out and whispered urgently into Mrs. Duarte's ear. Whatever he said wiped the smile from her face. Marina's half-spoken sentence dangled unfinished. For the first time, the manager looked at Marina as if truly seeing her. The Sheikh's gaze followed Marina, unwavering. His silence weighed more than marble. Mrs. Duarte tried to regain control, apologizing in English, promising a translator. Someone fumbled with a translation app. The guards shifted, forming a discreet wall. The hallway seemed to shrink around them. Marina felt heat rise into her cheeks. She wanted to shrink back into nothing, but the strange sense of belonging in his eyes unsettled her more than fear. The cloth in her hand was damp from her grip. She took a breath and let the words leave her completely this time. "Welcome. May your path here bring you peace," she said in Arabic, the rhythm deliberate, the way her grandmother once told stories. The phrase vibrated through the corridor. One of the guards half smiled in surprise. The Sheikh did not smile, but something in his eyes flashed, a spark of recognition, like someone finding a long-lost piece of a puzzle. Mrs. Duarte stammered, You understand her?" He nodded once. His next words, spoken only to Marina, were longer, deeper, impossible for anyone else to follow. Marina listened, lowered her gaze and answered with a short response, intimate in tone but unreadable to everyone else. "Mr." Rivera's eyebrows knitted with discomfort, as though an unspoken rule had been shattered. Without another word, the Sheikh walked into the ballroom. Just before the door closed behind him, he turned back. His glance at Marina was void of judgment or politeness. It was closer to acknowledgement. Marina exhaled slowly, forcing her hands to stop shaking. The smell of roasted coffee drifted from the lobby, but underneath it she sensed another fragrance, incense and dry wood, a memory she had sworn to bury. Back at her cart, she resumed cleaning. Voices trailed down the corridor. "How the hell does she speak like that?" a waiter whispered. "Maybe she worked in some weird place," another said, half suspicious, half admiring. Marina didn't turn. She preferred her own thoughts over their questions. Explaining would require reopening a world that she had spent years sealing shut. But that morning, as rain began tapping lightly against the glass facade of the hotel, something inside her shifted. She knew the hallway moment wouldn't fade easily. What she couldn't yet imagine was how determined the Sheikh would be not to let it pass as a curious accident. Behind the ballroom door, he was already issuing the first instruction that would pull her back into his orbit sooner than she wished. Marina tried to return to her routine as if nothing had happened. She scrubbed a fingerprint from a brass railing, adjusted a misplaced rug, and wiped a faint smudge from a window pane overlooking Wilshire Boulevard. Each movement followed years of practiced precision, yet something in her rhythm had changed. She could feel it in the way her hands shook the slightest bit, and in the way her breathing occasionally hitched without warning. She told herself to calm down, but her body didn't fully obey. Down the hallway, whispers floated through the air like drifting smoke. Two young housekeepers leaned into each other as Marina passed. One murmured, "She's hiding something." The other answered, "Maybe she used to be rich." Marina didn't break pace. Rumors spread fast in hotels, faster when the truth was stranger than the gossip. She wished more than anything to be invisible again, but it was already too late. "Mr." Rivera approached just before noon. He held an internal phone tight against his chest as he spoke low. "You need to come with me," he said. She glanced at her cart. "Do I bring this?" she asked. "No," he answered firmly. "Just you." She followed him past the elevators, each step slow and measured, though her heart galloped inside her chest. The ballroom door came into view like the entrance to a fate she wasn't prepared to face. Inside, the room was warm, filled with the glow of amber lighting. A long table stood set with small porcelain cups and brass trays of aromatic sweets. Hakim al-Zahiri sat upright in a high-backed chair, while two men in dark suits stood behind him like silent columns. Mrs. Duarte was at his side, smiling as though her face had been carved into that expression. The moment Marina stepped in, Hakim turned his head toward her. His voice came deep and careful. "Sit," he said in Arabic. Marina obeyed, noting the flicker of surprise on Mrs. Duarte's face as she pulled out a chair opposite him. Marina rested her hands on her lap to keep them from trembling. Hakim spoke again in Arabic. "How long have you worked here?" Marina answered quietly. 9 years, ever since she returned to the United States with nothing but 2 suitcases and her child. He nodded slowly. "Where did you learn my language?" he asked. Marina stared at the table for a moment before replying. "I once lived in Alexandria, working at a university library." His eyes brightened slightly as if confirming a personal theory. "You have the pronunciation of someone who did more than study," he said. Mrs. Duarte shifted her weight, forcing a laugh. "Perhaps we should bring in an official translator," she said in English. Hakim lifted one hand without looking at her. "No," he said simply, still watching Marina. Mrs. Duarte's jaw tensed behind her smile. Hakim leaned forward. "Tell me, why did you return here?" he asked. Marina replied in a hesitant voice. "Family matters." He waited, perhaps expecting more, but she offered no elaboration. One of the assistants scribbled something in a notebook, as if every breath between them mattered. Hakim nodded once. "You helped me once without knowing what I would become," he said. Her eyes widened despite her effort to remain calm. Hakim turned to Mrs. Duarte and switched to English. "I would like her to interpret for my private staff while I stay here." Mrs. Duarte froze for a beat before answering with an exaggerated politeness. "Of course, that is possible." Hakim did not return her smile. Then he looked at Marina again and spoke in Arabic. "Will you help me today?" Marina responded carefully. "If it is within my ability, yes." He gave a small signal. One of the guards opened a side door, and suddenly half a dozen men and women entered the ballroom, each carrying documents, phones, checklists. Marina stood beside Hakim and translated swiftly as he issued instructions, his tone exact, his expectations high. She moved between Arabic and English without hesitation, surprising herself with how natural it still felt to command that forgotten part of her mind. Mrs. Duarte watched with her arms crossed, nodding too frequently. Occasionally she whispered to Mr. Rivera. He responded with a simple shrug, as if to say the situation was no longer in their control. For almost an hour, Marina felt a strange dual existence. Her uniform declared her a cleaner, yet her words carried the weight of an educated woman who once discussed manuscripts in marble halls. Every time Hakim gave a new instruction, Marina returned it in precise English. Every time someone asked a question in English, she transformed it back into his language with rhythmic confidence. Finally, Hakim rested his hands on the table. "That is all for now," he said in Arabic. The staff members filed out of the room. Mrs. Duarte took a step forward with a deliberate smile. "Well, that was impressive," she said brightly. "You can return to your regular duties now, Marina." "Thank you." Hakim rose calmly. He looked at Marina and addressed her directly again in Arabic. "I will require you again soon." Marina nodded slightly. "Of course." He offered her the smallest gesture of respect, a faint lowering of his head, then left the ballroom with his escorts. As soon as he was gone, Mrs. Duarte's expression changed. She didn't raise her voice, but her words came fast and hard. "You need to understand your place," she said. "This was a special favor. You will not be needed again in that way." Marina held her posture steady, though her pulse raced. "Yes, Mrs. Duarte," she answered softly. The manager leaned in just enough for only Marina to hear. "Some guests enjoy illusions," she said coldly. "Don't let them confuse you about who you are." Marina lowered her eyes and stepped out. In the hallway, the hotel felt different, but not in a way she could name. Comments floated behind her. One employee said under his breath, "She thinks she's someone now." Another added, "Just wait until they toss her aside." She returned to cleaning, but her mind stayed in the ballroom. The memory of Hakim's words pulsed beneath her thoughts. "You helped me once. You didn't know what I would become." She wished she could dismiss the idea, shove it back into the past, yet it clung to her like the scent of old incense. By the end of the shift, Marina cleaned the last fingerprint from an executive suite door, glanced at her reflection once more, and finally clocked out. On the bus ride home, she pressed her forehead against a rain-streaked window. The city blurred with watery lights as she replayed every detail of Hakim's questions. Leo would be waiting with his homework spread across their kitchen table. She would smile, ask about his day, cook dinner, pretend nothing in their world had shifted. But inside, something dangerous and thrilling was already changing. Marina stepped off the bus and walked the final 3 blocks toward their apartment building, clutching her phone. She texted Leo that she was almost there. His reply came quickly. "Are you tired?" she answered. "Just hungry." She stuffed the phone back in her pocket. Upstairs, Leo looked up from his books. "You're late," he said. She kissed his forehead. "There was traffic," she replied. He gave a suspicious smile. "You always say that when something happens." She opened the refrigerator slowly, delaying an answer. "Nothing happened," she said. He didn't seem convinced. Long after Leo fell asleep, Marina lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Alexandria at twilight, about the sea air, about a younger version of herself, full of trust. She had run from that life to protect herself and her son. Now it seemed that life had chased her across continents to find her again. Marina whispered aloud to the dark room. "What do you want from me this time?" she said quietly. The next morning at the hotel, Marina barely had time to change into her uniform before Mr. Rivera appeared at the doorway. His mouth twitched with worry. "The Sheikh wants to see you." "Now," he said. Marina's grip tightened on her cleaning cloth. "For what?" she asked. "Mr. Rivera shook his head quickly. "I don't know. Mrs. Duarte says it's a special request and you can't refuse." Marina wiped her palms on her apron as she followed him down the hallway for the second time in 2 days. She looked straight ahead, refusing to glance at the other employees who had already started whispering again. At the end of the corridor, 2 tall guards stood beside the ballroom entrance. One of them stepped aside and opened the door without speaking. Inside, the lighting was warm again, and Hakim sat waiting alone at the long table with cups of tea steaming gently in front of him. There was no translator, no hotel manager, no staff members, only 2 empty seats across from him. As Marina stepped into the room, Hakim spoke in Spanish, slow but clear. "Sit, please." Marina obeyed without comment. Hakim's eyes were steady as he spoke again in Arabic. "I know who you are." Marina felt the room growing smaller, the past rushing forward like a wave. She tried to speak, but Hakim continued, his voice neither harsh nor kind. 15 years ago in Alexandria, he said, you worked in the university library. You helped students and travelers understand ancient texts. I was one of them." Marina's skin prickled. That life was supposed to be buried forever. She had come back to America to disappear, not to be found. Hakim leaned slightly forward. "You helped me when I had no name and no wealth," he said. "That day, you gave me more than you imagined." Marina forced herself to ask, her voice cracking, "Why are you looking for me now?" Hakim's answer came without pride. "Because I need someone I can trust for a cultural project in my country," he said, "and that person is you." Marina stared at him, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. The memory of ancient manuscripts and quiet marble halls flooded her heart. She had wanted to be invisible. Now someone from her past was offering to pull her into the light. She didn't know if it was a rescue or a trap. Hakim waited, his posture composed, his hands resting calmly. Marina couldn't speak. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "I need to think." "For now," Hakim replied gently. "That is all I ask." Marina walked out of the ballroom, with her steps carefully controlled, but it felt as if her heartbeat refused to obey the slow rhythm her body tried to impose. Mr. Rivera waited outside, shifting his weight anxiously from one foot to the other. He asked in a low voice if everything had gone well. Marina answered softly that she wasn't sure yet. He gave her a worried look, but didn't press further. She appreciated that about him. He worried without demanding answers. She returned to her cart and picked up her cloth as if nothing had changed, though she knew nothing was the same. Each corridor seemed different, each chandelier suddenly brighter, as if the world had turned its face in her direction for the first time in years. The danger wasn't in being seen once. The danger was in being unable to hide again afterward. News traveled impossibly fast. By the time Marina stepped into the service area at lunchtime, several employees fell silent when she entered. One young bellboy whispered that the Sheikh had been alone with her for half an hour. Another worker answered that she was probably being tested for something. Marina placed her lunch in the microwave and stared blankly at the rotating plate, feeling every murmur inside the room. When she sat down at a corner table, no one joined her, but she didn't mind the isolation. She had learned long ago that gossip stung less when you stopped trying to correct it. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Duarte called Marina to her office. The manager sat behind her desk wearing perfume so sharp that Marina felt it scratch the back of her throat. "Mrs. Duarte spoke in a voice that imitated warmth. "Marina, we're hearing that Mr. Al-Zahiri might be considering you for something beyond your duties here." "I need to remind you," she said, "that any arrangements with VIP guests must go through the hotel administration." Marina kept her gaze fixed on a spot just above the manager's shoulder. "I haven't accepted anything," she replied quietly. Mrs. Duarte didn't smile this time. "Let me be clear," she said. "If you make a move without clearance, your position here will be at risk." Marina swallowed carefully and answered that she understood. On her way back downstairs, Marina felt a flush of anger swell under her skin. For years, she had protected that job, attached herself to it as if it were a lifeline, accepted humiliation and invisibility as a kind of payment for stability. Now that someone else recognized her worth, the hotel wanted to keep hold of her, not out of respect, but out of control. The realization hurt more than she expected. The rest of the shift dragged. Every elegant carpet she vacuumed, every delicate vase she polished, felt like a test of patience. When the evening came, Marina clocked out, caught her bus, and found her seat near the back. Outside the window, palm trees swayed in the dusk breeze as the sky darkened with clouds that promised rain. She leaned her forehead against the cool glass. Could she uproot Leo's life? Could she trust Hakim after what had happened so long ago in Alexandria? Was this a blessing or a trap? At home, Leo looked up from his textbook when she came in. He asked if she wanted tea. She said yes. As they sat at the small kitchen table, he pushed a mug toward her. "What happened at work?" he asked. Marina answered that nothing unusual had happened. He frowned. "You're lying," he said gently. "Are they giving you more hours?" She hesitated before shaking her head. "No, just a little change," she replied. Leo eyed her with the type of mature suspicion that children raised by single parents learn too early. Marina forced a smile and told him to focus on his homework. She needed time before speaking the truth. That night, Marina dreamed of Alexandria. She walked again among rows of manuscripts in an old stone library while the sea wind moved through tall windows. In the dream, she heard Hakim's voice calling from somewhere between the shelves, but she could not see his face. When she woke, her pillow was damp near her cheek. She whispered aloud to the darkness. "Not again," she said, barely audibly. The next morning unfolded with deceptive normality. Marina rode the bus through traffic as the city woke. She reached the hotel earlier than usual, trying to convince herself that this would be an ordinary day. She changed into her uniform and tied her hair back tighter than ever. When she stepped into the hallway, employees stared openly this time. One chambermaid leaned toward another and said she thinks she's special now. Marina didn't slow down. She repeated in her mind that she was here to work, not to explain herself to anyone. Mr. Rivera intercepted her with a clipboard in hand, looking uncomfortable. He said cautiously that the Sheikh had requested her presence in the Esmeralda ballroom again at 10 in the morning. Marina stiffened. She looked at the time. Barely 2 hours to prepare for another encounter that might change everything. She asked quietly if Mrs. Duarte knew. Mr. Rivera nodded slowly and said that the manager wanted her to be professional and discreet. Marina worked faster than usual that morning, trying to lose herself in tasks. She washed glass surfaces until they reflected her face too clearly. She scrubbed corners of hallways that were already clean. Her thoughts scattered. When she finally wheeled her cart close to the ballroom, Hakim was already standing by the door, speaking in low tones on his phone. He wore a charcoal suit today, sharp and understated. He ended the call and watched her approach without speaking. Marina stood still, unsure if she should wait for instructions. Hakim gestured toward the open door. "Please come in," he said in English. Inside the room, the table had been replaced with several chairs and documents. 2 unfamiliar men and 1 woman sat waiting. Marina blinked, confused. Hakim spoke again in Arabic. "Sit with us. Marina obeyed slowly. Hakim introduced the others. They were advisors for his foundation working on a cultural preservation initiative. He turned to Marina and said in Arabic that he wanted her to assist temporarily during his stay in Los Angeles until the structure of his project could be confirmed abroad. Marina felt cornered by the implication that this was not just a conversation, but a preliminary interview. One of the advisors asked questions in brisk English. Where did she study? Why had she left Egypt? Did she have commitments that would prevent travel? Marina answered carefully, each response revealing just enough but not everything. Her fingers twisted in her lap under the table. The final question came from Hakim. Would you be willing to leave this life behind if you were given a new purpose? He asked. Marina's breath caught. Leo's face filled her mind. She steadied herself and replied, I would need to bring my son. Hakim nodded thoughtfully. That can be arranged, he said. Before she could process his reply, Mrs. Duarte burst in without knocking. Her smile was brittle. I apologize for the interruption, she said too brightly, but Marina is needed elsewhere in the hotel. Hakim looked at her without rising. She is with me at the moment, he said calmly. Mrs. Duarte's smile froze. I'm afraid our policies require staff to remain available for their primary duties, she insisted. Hakim still didn't move. I understand your concern, he said. As of now, I am formally requesting Marina as my exclusive interpreter during my stay. Please make the suitable adjustments. Mrs. Duarte's face reddened, despite her attempt to control it. Very well, she said, swallowing hard. Of course. She backed out of the room as if retreating from a confrontation she wasn't sure she had lost or won. Hakim turned back to Marina, his tone softer. I don't want you to feel pressured, he said in Arabic, but I need your answer tomorrow. Will you stay here or step into what comes next? Marina nodded slowly. She said in a quiet, controlled voice that she understood. When the meeting ended, Marina left the ballroom with her head spinning. The hallway felt colder now. She could no longer convince herself she was invisible. The entire hotel was watching her in open anticipation, some wanting her to fail, others wondering if she would rise. Marina returned to her cart and steadied her breathing. The future was unfolding faster than she had imagined, and the next 24 hours would determine everything. Marina hardly slept. She watched the numbers on her alarm clock change minute by minute until the darkness outside began to soften. When she finally rose, Leo was still sleeping with his arm wrapped around a worn blanket from his childhood. She stood quietly at his doorway for a moment. The decision she needed to make wasn't only about herself. At the hotel, she arrived earlier than usual. The air carried a tense anticipation as employees whispered near the staff entrance. Someone asked if she was really leaving with the Sheikh. Another answered that she was probably already rich and hiding it. Marina kept walking without responding. She wore the same uniform she had worn for almost a decade, but somehow it felt different on her skin today. It was no longer armor, it was a boundary she was preparing to cross. Mr. Rivera found her near the service elevators. His face showed concern. He asked gently if she was all right. Marina responded that she was fine. Mr. Rivera said that Mrs. Duarte wanted to see her before anything else happened. Marina asked if Hakim had requested her again. Mr. Rivera nodded and said yes, he did, first thing in the morning. Marina thanked him softly. She walked toward the manager's office, wondering what tone of voice Mrs. Duarte would use this time. Inside, the manager greeted her in a clipped voice. Sit down, she said. Marina stayed standing. Mrs. Duarte sighed in irritation. I hope you understand what you're risking, she said. You have a stable job here. That man will leave in a few days and forget about you. Don't be foolish. Marina answered steadily that she hadn't made a final decision yet. Mrs. Duarte leaned closer. Think wisely, she said. Women like you don't get second chances when they fall. Marina left the office without responding. Her hands trembled as she pushed her cart toward the ballroom. At the door, two guards stepped aside to let her pass. Inside, Hakim sat waiting with a pot of tea on the table. He gestured to the chair opposite him and spoke in Arabic. "Sit, we have little time." Marina complied without asking questions. Hakim poured tea and spoke in a calm, firm tone. "I will return overseas in a few days," he said. "I need your answer now." Marina stared at the steam rising from the cup. She said quietly that her life had become predictable here, and she feared losing what little stability she had. Hakim replied that stability is not living, it is only surviving. Marina lifted her eyes. She explained that she had a son who meant everything to her. If she left, it had to be with him. Hakim answered without hesitation. He said arrangements would be made for her son to move, study, and have what he needed. Marina asked what kind of work she would do. Hakim said she would oversee the preservation of rare manuscripts and help create a cultural center. He added that he trusted her because she had once helped him when she had no reason to. Marina breathed slowly. Hakim leaned forward. He said in Arabic, "Do not let fear build your future." Marina clasped her hands in her lap. She replied that she would give her answer by the end of the day. Hakim nodded once and said he would wait. Leaving the ballroom, Marina felt as if the hotel halls had become a narrow tunnel toward a single point. Waiters, receptionists, and cleaners watched her with open stares. A maintenance worker said loudly to a colleague that she was just pretending to be humble. Marina kept moving until she reached a rarely used storeroom and closed the door behind her for a moment of silence. She pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes. She whispered Leo's name as if to anchor herself. During break, she texted Leo. She asked how he would feel about living in another country. He replied that he didn't know. He said it depended if she would be there with him. Marina set the phone down while her heart squeezed painfully. She texted back that she would never leave him. Then Mr. Rivera knocked politely at the door. Marina looked up as he said he was just checking if she needed anything. She shook her head. Mr. Rivera told her quietly that whatever she chose, he hoped she would find peace. By late afternoon, Marina stood in front of the mirror in the staff bathroom. Her reflection seemed unfamiliar. The woman staring back at her looked older than she remembered, yet stronger too. She whispered softly that it was time. She walked toward the ballroom again, but this time without hesitation. Hakim and two of his advisors were finishing a discussion when she entered. Hakim turned to her and waited. Marina spoke first. She said in Arabic, "I accept if everything promised for my son is true." Hakim nodded respectfully. He replied that his word was his bond. He said arrangements would begin immediately. Marina stood still as Hakim spoke to one of his advisors, who began sending messages from a phone. Hakim turned back to Marina and asked if she wished to inform the hotel or if he should. Marina said she would handle it. Hakim suggested she finish her shift and meet him early the next morning to discuss travel documents. She agreed. Marina stepped into the hallway knowing the hardest part was coming. She went directly to Mrs. Duarte's office. The manager looked annoyed by her presence. Marina spoke in a calm voice and said she had accepted a position with Mr. Al-Zahiri and would be leaving the hotel. Mrs. Duarte's eyes widened, then narrowed. She said sharply that Marina was making a terrible mistake. Marina responded evenly that it was her decision. Mrs. Duarte said coldly that she would process Marina's resignation immediately. She added that Marina should not expect the hotel to welcome her back if she failed. Marina nodded once and turned to leave. As she walked out, Mrs. Duarte called after her, "Don't think you're better than us just because someone noticed you." Marina didn't turn back. She carried her head higher than she had in years. That evening, Marina rode home with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The city lights outside flickered through the bus windows. She knew her life was about to change forever. At home, Leo was sitting on the couch watching television. Marina sat beside him and took his hand. She told him they needed to talk. Leo looked worried and asked what happened. Marina told him she had accepted a new job overseas and asked if he was willing to go with her. Leo stared at her in shock. He asked where they were moving. Marina said she didn't know the exact place yet, only that it would be far away. Leo asked if she would be happier there. Marina said she hoped so. Leo nodded slowly and said he would go wherever she went. That night, Marina packed away her uniform in a small box. She folded it neatly, aware that she would never wear it again. She looked around their modest apartment. Everything inside it held a memory of struggle, of survival, and of love. She whispered to herself that this was not the end, but a beginning. Before sleeping, she texted Hakim a single sentence: "I am ready." Marina woke before dawn, unable to stay still in her bed. She moved quietly through the apartment, packing Leo's lunch and preparing coffee she barely tasted. Her mind raced through lists of tasks she had to complete before leaving the country, documents, notices, conversations that could not be avoided. Leo watched from the doorway, rubbing his eyes. He asked if she was nervous. Marina answered that she felt more alive than nervous. Leo said he had never seen her this way and tried to smile. At the hotel, employees were already whispering before she stepped through the staff entrance. Someone said she had betrayed the hotel. Another worker responded that she was chasing money. Marina entered without responding. She walked through the halls with calm steps, thinking that soon this entire world of marble and whispers would become part of her past. Mr. Rivera intercepted her near the supply closet. He asked softly if the rumors were true. Marina confirmed that she was leaving. Mr. Rivera looked pained but said he was happy for her. Marina thanked him sincerely. Mrs. Duarte was nowhere in sight, but others made their opinions known with their eyes. One receptionist stared openly and said under her breath that Marina must think she's a princess now. A porter said she would probably fall flat in the desert. Marina straightened her back and kept moving. She entered the ballroom right on time. Hakim was already there, with a briefcase beside him. He said in Arabic that the arrangements were proceeding quickly. Marina asked if he needed her to sign anything. Hakim told her she would meet with representatives later in the day to finalize legal permissions. 2 advisors arrived and handed Marina a stack of documents. One of them explained in English that she would need a temporary exit permit from her employer. Marina said that the hotel had already agreed to release her. Hakim gave a short nod. He said in Arabic that she would meet his personal attorney in the afternoon. Marina downloaded everything she needed to her phone. She tried to absorb the instructions, even as her stomach churned with the speed of change. After their meeting, Marina walked back into the hotel lobby to inform the Human Resources Office of her departure. On her way, she passed a group of workers gathered near the elevators. A young housekeeper asked loudly if Marina believed she was too good for a cleaning cart now. Marina paused for a moment, unsure whether to respond. She finally said calmly that she had given the hotel the best years of her life, and now it was time to leave. The housekeeper scoffed and turned away. Inside the HR office, Marina filled out forms while a clerk typed slowly on a computer. The clerk looked surprised as she confirmed Marina's resignation. The clerk asked politely if Marina was certain about her decision. Marina answered that she had never been more certain about anything. When the process was finished, Marina walked through the lobby once more. Some guests already recognized her from her appearance beside Hakim in the lobby the previous day. A woman in a designer dress stopped her and said she had heard gossip that Marina was leaving with a powerful man. Marina answered quietly that she was leaving for work she believed in. Back in the service corridor, Marina removed her name tag and placed it in a small envelope for HR. She carried her cleaning gloves in one hand. Mr. Rivera approached again. He asked if she needed help with anything before she left. Marina shook her head. She said she was grateful for his kindness over the years. Mr. Rivera looked emotional and said he had always respected her. Marina smiled for the first time that day. During her lunch break, Marina called Leo from inside the staff locker room. She asked if he had told any of his friends at school about their upcoming move. Leo said no because he wasn't sure how to explain it. She told him to wait until she confirmed the official departure date. Leo asked if he would be able to continue school overseas. Marina replied that everything would be arranged. She said she would not allow him to lose anything in this transition. Leo's voice softened as he thanked her for thinking of him first. In the afternoon, Marina met Hakim's attorney in a small private dining room near the lobby. The attorney introduced himself formally and handed her additional contracts and a confidentiality agreement. He explained in careful English that Marina would be under direct employment of the Al-Zahiri Cultural Foundation and that her salary would reflect her bilingual expertise and archival knowledge. Marina read the figures twice, shocked by numbers larger than anything she had imagined. She asked how soon the move would occur. The attorney said quietly that they planned to leave in 1 month to allow Marina to resolve her personal affairs. Marina nodded and signed the documents with a steady hand. When she returned to the ballroom with the signed contracts, Hakim was preparing for another diplomatic meeting. He asked in Arabic if she had any doubts left. Marina answered that she had many fears, but no doubts. Hakim responded that fear was a natural companion to change. He added that he would personally ensure Leo's well-being. Marina thanked him sincerely and said it mattered more than anything else. Hakim studied her face before saying that her strength was the reason he had approached her again after all these years. He then excused himself to greet arriving officials. Marina walked out into the hallway feeling dazed. Everything had happened faster than she expected. She retrieved her few belongings from the locker room and placed them in a small shoulder bag. As she stepped out into the lobby for the last time in uniform, the rain began to fall outside, streaking the glass windows. Marina stood still for a moment, watching the water blur the city beyond. She whispered softly that she forgave the hotel for not knowing her worth. When she reached the front doors, Mr. Rivera hurried toward her one last time. He asked if he could walk her to the bus stop. Marina agreed. They walked in silence for a full block before he finally spoke. He said he hoped she would find what she was looking for. Marina answered quietly that she wasn't searching for anything except the chance to stop hiding. Mr. Rivera sighed and said he believed she had always deserved more than the hotel could give. Before turning back, Mr. Rivera said he would miss her presence in the hallways. Marina thanked him and said she would carry memories of his kindness into her new life. On the bus ride home, Marina held the signed contracts in her bag like sacred papers. She looked out the window at the wet pavement and thought of Alexandria again. She remembered the library aisles and the old letters she once translated for curious students. She had believed that version of herself was gone forever. Now it seemed that life had found a way to connect the past and future through one unexpected thread. When Marina entered the apartment, Leo was doing homework at the dining table. He asked if she was finished for the day. Marina said she was finished forever. She pulled out the documents and placed them on the table. Leo looked at the papers in confusion. Marina explained that they were official contracts for their move and that they would need to apply for his travel papers soon. Leo asked if he would need to leave his friends. Marina hesitated, then said he could stay in touch with them by phone and video. Leo read the contract quietly, then said that if this made her happy, it was worth it. Marina sat beside him and held his hand. She said she hoped it would make both of them happy. That night, Marina packed her cleaning gloves, folded her old uniform one last time, and placed both items in a small box she sealed with tape. She tucked the box onto a high shelf in the closet. As she climbed down the step stool, she whispered that she had given the hotel everything she could, and now she was done giving away parts of herself for nothing in return. Before going to bed, Marina sent a brief message to Hakim. She wrote that everything was in motion and she was ready to move forward. He responded a few minutes later saying that his team would take care of the next steps. Marina stood at the window watching distant lights flicker across the city. She told herself that she was not running away this time. She was stepping toward her future with her eyes open. Marina spent the next 2 weeks caught between two worlds. By day, she handled passport paperwork, packed belongings into cardboard boxes, and met with representatives from Hakim's foundation. By night, she sat with Leo, going over Arabic phrases and showing him photographs of the country that would soon become their new home. Leo asked endless questions, and Marina answered everyone, even when fear flickered behind her eyes. One morning, Hakim sent a car to bring Marina and Leo to a private consulate office for expedited documentation. The driver introduced himself as Youssef and spoke politely in Arabic-accented English. He asked if the boy was nervous. Leo replied that he wasn't nervous, only curious. Marina smiled at her son's bravery, though her own stomach tightened. With each mile the car traveled across downtown traffic. Inside the consulate, an official in a polished uniform asked Leo to stand straight for a photograph. The man said firmly that he must not smile. Leo stopped smiling immediately. Marina watched anxiously, silently counting seconds. The official checked forms before stamping everything with a final loud click. He said that their documents would be ready within a week. Marina exhaled slowly for the first time that morning. Outside, Hakim's driver opened the car door with gentle formality. He asked if they wanted to return home or go somewhere else. Marina said she wanted to take Leo to see the ocean one last time before they left. Youssef nodded and drove them towards Santa Monica. Along the way, Leo pressed his face to the window and said that Los Angeles looked smaller now that he was about to leave it. Marina placed a hand on his shoulder and said change makes the familiar appear different. On the pier, Marina and Leo walked silently, watching gulls dive over grey waves. Leo asked if Marina had been afraid when she left Egypt years ago. She replied that she'd been terrified, but had told herself bravery was just fear with movement. Leo asked if she was afraid now. Marina admitted she was still afraid, but this time she wasn't running from something. She was running towards something new. Back at the apartment that evening, Marina continued sorting items into piles marked keep, donate, or discard. Leo found an old photograph of Marina as a young woman standing in front of the library in Alexandria. He asked who took the picture. Marina said an old friend she had once trusted. Leo asked if Hakim had also been her friend then. Marina hesitated before answering that he had been someone she had helped during a difficult time. Leo asked what happened between them. Marina said simply that life pulled them in different directions. Several days later, Marina received notification that their travel documents were finalized. Hakim texted to confirm their exact departure date and said that the Foundation's plane would collect them privately. Marina read the message twice, stunned by the idea that she and Leo would fly out not on a crowded commercial flight, but on a private jet. She typed back that she appreciated everything he was doing. Hakim replied that her trust mattered more than her gratitude. That afternoon, Marina visited the hotel one final time to collect her last paycheck and sign tax forms. She walked through the lobby in plain clothes, ignoring stares from former co-workers. A receptionist whispered, "She is back already." A bellboy responded, "She must have failed." Marina stopped at the front desk and asked for her paperwork. The clerk behind the desk looked flustered and said he would call Mrs. Duarte. Marina said firmly there was no need. While waiting, Marina noticed Mr. Rivera approaching quickly. He asked if she needed help. Marina told him she only came for administrative purposes. Mr. Rivera said that many people in the hotel were still talking about her. He advised her not to listen. Marina thanked him. Mrs. Duarte appeared moments later wearing a stiff smile. She handed Marina a small envelope. She said coolly that they had processed everything and wished Marina luck. Marina took the envelope and said quietly that luck was simply preparation meeting opportunity. Mrs. Duarte's smile froze. She said sharply that Marina would discover the world was cruel outside the hotel's protection. Marina answered that she had already discovered more cruelty inside than out. Without waiting for a reply, Marina turned and walked away. Back in the car, Marina opened the envelope. Inside was her final paycheck and a brief typed note from hotel administration, acknowledging her years of service. There were no personal words of thanks. Marina folded the note once and placed it into her bag without expression. At home, Marina found Leo waiting with 2 backpacks packed to the brim. He asked if it was time to go. Marina said they still had 3 more days. Leo looked relieved. He said he wanted to visit his friend Jacob at the park before leaving. Marina agreed. They walked to the neighborhood park, where Leo and Jacob sat on swings, talking quietly. Marina sat on a bench nearby, watching them. A mother on the next bench asked if Marina was moving away. Marina answered yes. The woman said she would miss seeing Leo and complimented Marina on raising a polite child. Marina thanked her softly. That evening, Marina prepared their last dinner in the apartment. Rice, roasted chicken, and steamed vegetables. Leo asked if food would be very different in their new country. Marina said some flavors would be unfamiliar, but there would be new favorites to discover. Leo asked if Marina was excited. Marina said she was trying to be, and Leo laughed when Marina admitted she was also overwhelmed. Before bedtime, Marina checked on Leo and found him sleeping deeply with one hand resting on his suitcase. She watched him for a long moment, whispering a promise that she would never bring him into danger. She then sat at the kitchen table, rereading the contract from Hakim's foundation. She underlined the section promising Leo's full educational support. She whispered his future is worth everything as her eyes filled with grateful tears. The morning of their departure arrived under a soft pink sunrise. Marina and Leo checked the apartment one last time. Marina touched the walls gently and said thank you to the space that sheltered them during years of struggle. They carried their suitcases downstairs just as the private car arrived. The driver, Youssef, stepped out and greeted them warmly. He asked if they were ready. Leo answered before Marina could speak and said he was ready. As the car pulled away from the curb, Marina looked out the window for a final glimpse of their street. She said softly that every ending holds a beginning. Leo leaned against her shoulder and asked if their future would be incredible. Marina replied that incredible futures belong to those brave enough to leave the past behind. Marina watched from the window as the private jet cut through layers of white clouds. Leo sat beside her, pressing his forehead against the glass, his eyes wide with wonder. He asked if they were above the world now. Marina told him they were between what was familiar and what was waiting for them. Leo asked if that meant they were floating. Marina nodded and said floating was sometimes necessary before you could land on a new life. When the plane touched down on a private runway, warmth enveloped them the moment they stepped outside. Marina felt an unfamiliar dry heat against her skin as sunlight poured over endless sand-colored buildings stretching into the distance. A woman wearing a light blue headscarf stepped forward. She introduced herself as Noor, assistant to Hakim. Noor welcomed them graciously and asked if they were tired. Marina answered politely that they were prepared for whatever came next. Noor smiled and led them to a sleek black car waiting nearby. As they drove toward the capital, Leo asked how long they would stay in this country. Marina said quietly that their stay would depend on how much good they could do while they were here. Noor glanced at Marina through the rearview mirror and said that Hakim believed Marina's arrival was not chance, but destiny. Marina did not answer, but looked out at the sprawling city where skyscrapers rose beside ancient stone architecture. She felt the weight of her past pressing lightly against her chest. At the entrance of Hakim's residence, security personnel checked documents quickly before waving them through. Marina expected extravagance but was surprised by elegant simplicity. Inside, cool marble floors and arched ceilings echoed softly. Hakim approached and greeted Marina with a respectful nod. He greeted Leo with kind curiosity. Hakim asked Leo if the journey had been comfortable. Leo answered nervously that it had been exciting. Hakim smiled slightly and told Leo he was brave. Hakim turned to Marina and spoke in Arabic. "Your new home is ready," he said. He led them down a hallway into a guest house behind the main palace. The space was bright and welcoming with white walls, woven carpets and carved wooden furniture. Marina thanked Hakim formally. Hakim answered that her work would begin after she had a few days to rest and adjust. He said that tutors would arrive to help Leo transition into his new environment. Marina felt relief mixed with gratitude as she said that Leo's future meant everything to her. Hakim responded that Leo was now under his protection as well. Once Hakim left, Marina unpacked slowly while Leo explored every room. Leo ran back holding a carved wooden box and asked if she thought there were treasures inside. Marina told him that their real treasure was the chance to start anew. Leo placed the box carefully on a shelf and said he wanted to remember this day forever. The next morning, Marina dressed in a modest blouse and long skirt provided by Noor. She walked to the main library where the Foundation had begun assembling manuscripts. Hakim waited there with a team of scholars from around the world. He introduced Marina as the new director of language preservation. Marina felt her throat tighten at the title. Hakim asked her in Arabic to demonstrate her translation process. Marina stepped forward and opened a thick manuscript carefully. She explained in clear English and Arabic how the document should be handled and restored, speaking with authority she had forgotten she possessed. The room fell silent as she worked. When she finished, Hakim said firmly to the scholars that Marina's word was to be respected as his own. Later that afternoon, Marina drank tea with Hakim in a quiet courtyard. Hakim said gently in Arabic that he had always remembered her kindness in Alexandria. Marina replied that she was surprised he recognized her after so many years. Hakim admitted that he had searched for her, believing she had returned to Mexico. Marina said she had wanted to disappear. Hakim looked at her carefully and asked if she still wanted to hide. Marina whispered that she was tired of hiding. Hakim said then it was time for her to live without fear. Marina met his gaze and thanked him sincerely. That evening, Marina sat with Leo in their new living room, reviewing his Arabic lessons. Leo complained that some words were difficult. Marina told him that every language becomes easier if you use it to speak about things you love. Leo asked if she had loved speaking Arabic when she was young. Marina said yes, she had once loved every sound of it, but had been afraid to speak it for many years. Leo looked serious and said she was speaking it again now. Marina smiled proudly. Days turned into a steady routine. Marina oversaw teams cataloguing delicate parchments while Leo attended lessons alongside other children. He began bringing home new words and sentences, and Marina felt hope swell each time he practiced. One afternoon, Leo asked when they would see Hakim again. Marina said they would likely see him at an upcoming cultural event. Leo asked if Hakim was their friend. Marina paused before answering that Hakim had become someone they could trust. One night, Marina received an invitation. Noor delivered it on a gold-edged card. The message said Hakim was hosting a private dinner to formally introduce Marina as part of the foundation. Marina read it twice and placed it on the table. Leo asked if they needed to dress up. Marina said yes, and Leo pretended to groan. Inside, she worried that this dinner would push her into another level of public visibility. She whispered to herself that she could not remain shy forever. At the dinner, Marina wore a simple dress Hakim's staff had provided. The hall was filled with dignitaries and scholars. Hakim stood at the head of the room wearing formal robes. He raised his glass and spoke loudly in Arabic. He told everyone that Marina had saved his life in ways she did not understand, and that now he was honored to bring her into his world not as a guest, but as an essential partner. Marina felt every eye turn toward her. She stood frozen for a heartbeat before stepping forward. She said in Arabic that she was grateful for the chance to serve knowledge rather than silence. The room applauded. Hakim's expression was warm as he nodded. After the dinner, Marina found Hakim alone on a balcony overlooking the moonlit city. She said quietly that he had surprised her with his speech. He said he only spoke the truth. Marina asked if he believed destiny had brought them together again. Hakim answered that sometimes destiny needed a door, and she had been brave enough to open it. Marina looked at the stars and whispered a thank you carried by the desert wind. Before going to bed that night, Marina checked on Leo. He slept peacefully, clutching a new Arabic children's book. Marina leaned over him and whispered a promise that she would never go back to living in the shadows. She stepped outside onto their private patio and stared at the wide sky overhead, feeling smaller than she had ever felt, yet fuller than she had ever imagined possible. Marina woke before sunrise, standing at the window with her hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea. The call to prayer drifted through the city in a distant echo as the first light painted rooftops in gold. She breathed slowly, feeling the life she had stepped into settling around her like a garment made to fit. Leo padded into the room, rubbing his eyes, and asked if she was already working. Marina told him she was only thinking. Leo asked if she was thinking about the past again. Marina said she was thinking about the future. Marina moved through the library like a woman who had finally stepped fully into her skin. Her voice no longer trembled when she gave instructions, and her eyes no longer searched for permission before speaking. Scholars traveled from distant countries to consult with her on preservation techniques. They addressed her formally, calling her Director Silver, never suspecting how recently she had scrubbed marble floors. Sometimes she caught herself wondering if it might all vanish suddenly like a dream. But then she would see Leo running between towering bookshelves, laughing in fluent Arabic, and knew her new life was real. One morning, Hakim called Marina to meet him in a private conference room. Papers were spread across the table. He said in a measured tone that the foundation had approved an expansion project to build a satellite library in a northern province. He asked Marina to lead the operation. Marina sat quietly processing the weight of his request. She asked if he trusted her to guide something so large. Hakim answered that he trusted her more than anyone else. Marina folded her hands on the table and said she would accept the responsibility and would honor the project with her full heart. Construction began a month later. Marina traveled frequently by jeep to the edge of the desert, where the new library would rise from the ground. She walked the construction site wearing a headscarf to protect herself from the wind and sand. Workers greeted her respectfully as she checked architectural plans and examined spaces where ancient volumes would one day rest. One afternoon, a storm of dust forced everyone to take shelter in temporary tents. Marina sat with local builders who asked curiously how she had come to lead such a project. Marina said quietly that life had given her a second chance to become who she was always meant to be. The workers nodded understanding. Back in the city, Leo thrived in his new school. He grew taller and began joking in a mixture of English and Arabic. One evening after dinner, he asked Marina why life had chosen such a surprising path for them. Marina answered that sometimes life waits until we are strong enough to carry what belongs to us. Leo asked if she believed she was strong now. Marina looked at him and said she believed strength had been inside her even during her weakest days, waiting to be recognized. Months passed, and the satellite library neared completion. Hakim came to inspect the building with Marina. He walked slowly through stone corridors, touched by sunlight, and said that the place felt sacred. Marina said she wanted it to be a sanctuary for voices nearly forgotten. Hakim looked at her with pride and said she had turned a dream into reality. Marina replied that it was his dream first. Hakim answered that no dream lives without someone brave enough to carry it forward. At the inauguration ceremony, government officials praised Marina's dedication. Scholars from all over the region shook her hand and thanked her in multiple languages. Leo stood beside Marina wearing a tailored suit and a shy expression. After the speeches, Leo tugged Marina's sleeve and whispered that she looked happier than he had ever seen. Marina crouched and said she was happy because he had walked this entire journey with her. Hakim approached and announced to reporters that Marina represented the Foundation's commitment to honor every silenced memory. Marina felt a swell of emotion as flashbulbs captured her standing where she had once only dreamed of belonging. Later that evening, Hakim invited Marina and Leo to his personal quarters for tea. He said softly that the Foundation wished to offer Marina a permanent senior position. Marina stared in disbelief. She asked if that meant she would never have to return to her old life. Hakim said kindly that her old life had transformed into the stepping stone that brought her here. Leo looked up at his mother and asked if they would stay in this country forever. Marina placed a hand on his shoulder and said their future stretched far beyond any one place now. Hakim observed silently as Marina embraced her son. Before leaving, Hakim stepped close to Marina and said in Arabic that destiny owed her for the years she spent invisible. Marina replied that she owed destiny nothing because she had paid with courage. Hakim said he admired her even more for saying so. Then he added that whatever path she chose next, she would never walk alone again. That night, Marina sat on the stone steps outside her home, looking up at a vast sky filled with more stars than she had ever seen in Los Angeles. Leo sat beside her wrapped in a thin blanket. He asked if she remembered when they had barely had enough money to buy bus passes. Marina said she remembered every moment. Leo said it felt like another life. Marina said it was another life they had survived to reach this one. Leo asked what she wanted now, since she already seemed to have everything. Marina thought quietly before answering that she wanted to help others who felt trapped the way she once had. Leo nodded thoughtfully and said he wanted to do the same when he grew up. In the quiet just before dawn, Marina whispered a promise to herself that she would never again allow fear to silence her. She closed her eyes and pictured the hotel hallway where this new life began. She sent a silent message of gratitude to the woman she had once been, the one who whispered in Arabic without knowing it would open a doorway across the world. As sunlight began to rise over the desert skyline, Marina stood and held Leo's hand. She told him they had more journeys ahead. Leo asked if they would continue walking toward whatever was next. Marina replied that they would walk forward always, with open hearts and strong voices. Together, they stepped back inside their home, each carrying the quiet certainty that they had not just found a new life, but had claimed the right to live it fully, seen, respected, and unafraid. At the Foundation Library, Marina supervised a shipment of manuscripts arriving from a rural archive. She instructed workers on how to unpack each crate gently. One assistant whispered that Marina treated paper like treasure. Another assistant replied that sometimes paper contained entire worlds. Marina heard them, but said nothing. She read the labels, traced the faded Arabic script of centuries-old pages, and felt as though her old life and present self were merging with every document she touched. Hakim entered the library quietly. He asked if everything had arrived safely. Marina replied that nothing had been damaged so far. Hakim said the next phase of the project would require traveling to remote regions to secure more delicate manuscripts. Marina asked if he truly intended to restore them all. Hakim said he intended to preserve every story ever silenced. Marina looked at him carefully before saying that silence had nearly erased her too. Hakim answered that bringing her here was his way of correcting what the world had tried to erase. That evening, Leo came home complaining about difficult lessons. He said his tutor expected perfect grammar in Arabic. Marina told him the tutor was only strict because he saw Leo was capable. Leo asked if she believed he could truly become part of this country. Marina said his heart already belonged here more than he realized. Leo looked thoughtful and asked if Hakim was proud of Marina. Marina answered quietly that she wasn't doing this for pride, but for purpose. Leo said he thought Hakim looked proud every time he saw her speak Arabic. At the next foundation meeting, Marina presented research to a circle of scholars. She switched between languages effortlessly, feeling confidence rise each time a nod of respect was directed her way. After the meeting, a professor approached. He said that he had never expected to be instructed by a former hotel cleaner. Marina smiled without offense and replied that life had hidden her in plain sight until she was ready to be seen again. The professor shook her hand firmly. Days later, Hakim asked Marina to accompany him on a short trip to inspect a rare collection. Marina hesitated and asked if Leo could handle her absence. Hakim assured her tutors and staff would care for Leo. Marina finally agreed. As they drove through open roads flanked by desert, Hakim spoke softly. He said he had once crossed a different desert in his youth, searching for meaning when he was poor and unknown. Marina listened quietly until she said that perhaps survival had trained both of them to recognize each other again years later. Hakim said, "Destiny never forgets a debt." At the archive site, Marina wore protective gloves and lifted a fragile scroll. She explained to local archivists how to stabilize the thin parchment. Hakim stood back, watching her with raised eyebrows. When she finished, he said respectfully that she carried herself with the dignity of a queen. Marina answered gently that she was only learning to carry herself with the dignity of being fully alive. One evening after their return, Hakim invited Marina and Leo to a private family dinner. Leo sat politely at the table while Hakim's cousins asked him questions about school. Leo answered shyly at first, but slowly grew animated. Hakim watched Marina across the table with quiet approval. When everyone finished eating, Hakim walked Marina to the garden. He asked if she had begun to feel at home. Marina replied that she was afraid of being too comfortable too quickly. Hakim said sometimes comfort was not the enemy, but the reward after years of hardship. Marina looked up at the night sky. She said her greatest fear had been that coming here would force her to confront everything she tried to forget. Hakim responded that he would never force her to relive a past she wanted to bury. Marina said she no longer wanted to bury it. She wanted to understand how it shaped her. Hakim nodded and said perhaps understanding was the final form of healing. Marina whispered that she hoped so. Months passed quietly. Marina developed routines, led restoration teams, and watched Leo adapt into a confident student. Leo started making friends and practicing conversations in fluent Arabic. One afternoon, he ran toward Marina and said his teacher had chosen him to recite a poem at a school celebration. Marina asked if he was afraid. Leo shook his head and said courage was fear in motion, repeating her own words back to her. Marina hugged him tightly. On the day of Leo's recital, Marina sat in the front row next to Hakim. Children stood on stage reading poetry. When Leo's turn came, he stepped forward and spoke with clear voice in Arabic. He read a poem about journeys and new beginnings. As his voice echoed through the hall, Marina felt tears forming. Hakim leaned toward her and asked if she was proud. Marina whispered she had never felt more proud of anything. Hakim said softly that Leo's courage reflected hers. After the recital, Leo ran into Marina's arms. He asked if he had done well. Marina said he had done beautifully. Hakim placed a hand gently on Leo's shoulder and said he had spoken like someone who understood the power of language. Leo smiled. Marina looked at Hakim and said that every part of this journey had brought them to this moment. Hakim answered that journeys were measured by hearts touched, not miles traveled. That night, Marina stood alone on the balcony of her home. She whispered to the wind that she was no longer afraid. She had left the invisibility of a hotel hallway and found herself in the center of a world where her voice mattered. She closed her eyes, imagining her grandmother telling stories in distant Alexandria. Marina whispered that she had finally returned to herself. As she looked out at the city lights stretching across the horizon, Marina heard Leo in the doorway behind her, asking if everything would stay beautiful forever. Marina turned and took his hand. She told him that beauty was not in places, but in the courage to keep walking forward. Leo asked where they would walk next. Marina answered that they would walk wherever their hearts guided them, with heads held high, no longer hiding. Leo squeezed her hand. Together they stood under the stars, both knowing that this was not the end of their story, but only the beginning of all that was still to come. Every story hides a message, and this one reminds us how even in the smallest, quietest lives, destiny can open unexpected doors. If this touched you, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your voice makes this journey even greater.